When you go silent, something subtle but powerful begins to happen inside her emotional world. At first, it may feel like nothing is changing on the surface. Days pass, there's no message, no reaction, no explanation. But silence doesn't mean absence in the mind. In fact, silence creates space, and space is where emotions get louder. When you're no longer present to reassure, entertain, or respond, her mind starts filling in the gaps on its own. That's when emotional attachment begins to activate at a deeper level. Most men believe attraction grows through constant communication. They think more texts, more calls, more explanations will keep a woman emotionally connected. In reality, overavailability kills emotional tension. When you remove yourself, you remove predictability. And when predictability disappears, the brain starts searching for meaning. She begins replaying past moments, conversations, laughter, and shared experiences, not because you asked her to, but because her mind is trying to restore emotional balance. Silence triggers comparison. She starts comparing how she feels now versus how she felt when you were in her life. When you were there, she had attention, emotional safety, and a sense of being chosen. When you're gone, that emotional comfort vanishes. The absence creates contrast, and contrast creates awareness. She becomes aware of what you added to her life that she didn't fully appreciate when it was readily available. This is where emotional attachment strengthens rather than fades. Attachment doesn't grow from being chased. It grows from emotional investment. When she is forced to think, wonder, and remember, she is investing emotionally without you doing anything at all. Silence makes her do the emotional work. Her imagination becomes more powerful than any message you could send. She begins asking herself questions she didn't ask before. Why does this feel different? Why hasn't he reached out? Why does this bother me more than I expected? The human mind dislikes unfinished emotional loops. When communication stops abruptly, it creates an open loop that the brain desperately wants to close. She may check her phone more often, reread old messages, or think about things she wishes she had said differently. That mental engagement keeps you alive in her emotional landscape. Ironically, the less you say, the more she thinks. Silence also removes emotional pressure. When you stop trying to convince, prove, or persuade, there's no resistance. There's no argument for her to defend against, no emotional tug-of-war. Instead, there's calm, and within that calm, her true feelings have room to surface. Attraction thrives in freedom, not force. By staying silent, you give her complete emotional freedom, and that freedom often pulls her back. Another important element is dignity. Silence communicates self-respect. It shows that you're not dependent on validation, answers, or reassurance from her. You're not trying to control the outcome. This quietly positions you as emotionally grounded and centered. That strength becomes attractive over time, especially when contrasted with men who beg, argue, or over-explain. Your silence says, I know my value, even if you don't right now. As days turn into weeks, the emotional weight of silence grows heavier. At first, she may feel relief or curiosity. Later, that curiosity turns into discomfort. The lack of information becomes unsettling. The mind starts assuming possibilities. Maybe you've moved on. Maybe you're happy without her. Maybe she wasn't as important as she thought. Those thoughts sting because they threaten her sense of significance. And that sting is emotional attachment revealing itself. Silence also gives memories room to soften. The mind naturally filters out intensity over time. Conflicts lose their sharp edges. What remains are emotional highlights, connection, chemistry, laughter, and closeness. When you're not present to trigger negative emotions, The memory of you becomes warmer, calmer, and more idealized. You transform from a person she was reacting to into a feeling she's missing. The key is that silence must come from strength, not manipulation. It's not about trying to hurt her or force a reaction. It's about stepping back and allowing natural emotional processes to unfold. When you stop interfering, you stop interrupting her emotional journey. You let her arrive at her own conclusions, and conclusions reached internally are far more powerful than anything imposed from the outside. In the end, silence doesn't erase you, it magnifies you. It strips away noise and leaves only the emotional truth behind. And when that truth surfaces, it often sounds like this inside her mind: "He mattered more than I realized." When you choose not to chase, not to over-explain, and not to demand reassurance, something counterintuitive happens. Your value rises in her perception. Scarcity has always been one of the most powerful drivers of attraction. What is always available is rarely appreciated, but what feels limited suddenly becomes important. Your silence creates that limitation. It signals that access to you is no longer guaranteed, and that realization shifts how she sees you. Most men lower their value by trying to secure attention. They text first, text again, and then explain why they texted. They react emotionally, hoping to fix the situation through effort. This behavior communicates neediness even when their intentions are good. When you step back instead, you communicate emotional self-control. You show that your sense of worth does not depend on her response. That self-control is rare, and rarity increases value. Silence disrupts expectations. She may be used to men pursuing, checking in, or seeking clarity. When you don't do that, BRE sends KS. Equilibrato, she expected you to react a certain way, and you didn't. That unexpected behavior forces her to reassess you. The question changes from "how do I feel about him?" to "why isn't he doing what everyone else does?" Curiosity is born, and curiosity is the gateway to renewed attraction. Scarcity also introduces competition, even if no one else is visibly present. When you are no longer accessible, the possibility that others might have access to you becomes real in her mind. She begins to imagine you living your life, meeting new people, laughing, and moving forward without her. That imagined loss elevates your value because humans instinctively want what they might lose. It's not jealousy in the dramatic sense. It's the fear of missing out on something meaningful. Your silence also reframes the power dynamic. When communication is one-sided, the person who wants more contact usually has less leverage. By staying silent, you remove yourself from that imbalance. You are no longer seeking, you are allowing. This subtly shifts you into a position of strength. Strength is attractive because it implies confidence, boundaries, and self-respect. You are no longer trying to win her back, you are standing still in your value. Another important factor is emotional independence. Silence communicates that your happiness is not tied to a single outcome. You're not collapsing emotionally because she pulled away. You're not scrambling to fix things. This creates an image of a man who has options, purpose, and direction. Even if she doesn't consciously articulate it, she feels it. Emotional independence is magnetic because it signals stability and maturity. As time passes, the absence of your presence becomes louder than any words you could have sent. She notices that you didn't try to manipulate her emotions. You didn't guilt her. You didn't pressure her. Instead, you respected yourself enough to step back. That restraint often earns more respect than any grand gesture ever could. Respect and attraction are deeply connected. When one grows, the other often follows. Scarcity also sharpens focus. When you were readily available, she may have taken your attention for granted. When that attention disappears, she becomes more aware of its value. The jokes, the support, the way you listened, the way you made her feel seen, those qualities gain weight in hindsight. Your silence turns ordinary moments into meaningful ones because they are no longer easily replaceable. It's important to understand that this rise in value doesn't come from playing games. It comes from alignment. You are aligning your behavior with self-worth rather than fear. You are not trying to prove anything. You are simply refusing to overextend where you are not being met. That boundary is powerful. It tells her, without a single word, that you expect mutual effort and respect. Over time, this new perception settles in. You are no longer the man who was always there. You become the man who chose himself. And that choice changes everything. When she thinks of you, she doesn't think of desperation or emotional chaos. She thinks of strength, calm, and mystery. She thinks of someone who knows his value, and that is the kind of presence that lingers. In the end, scarcity doesn't make you important by force. It reveals the importance that was already there but overlooked. By stepping back, you allow her to see you clearly, often more clearly than she ever did when you were right in front of her. What truly hurts her is not just your absence, but the sudden loss of emotional certainty you once provided. When you were present, you represented stability, familiarity, and emotional grounding. You were someone she could predict, rely on, and emotionally orient herself around. Even if there were problems or disagreements, there was still a sense of knowing where you stood. When you go silent, that certainty disappears, and the emotional discomfort that follows is far more powerful than simple missing. Human beings are wired to seek emotional safety. When she had you in her life, part of her nervous system relaxed because there was a known emotional pattern. Your presence, your reactions, your attention, these became familiar reference points. Once those reference points vanish, her emotional system feels unsettled. She may not consciously recognize it, but internally there is a disruption. Silence removes the emotional floor beneath her feet. At first, she may try to rationalize it. She tells herself she's fine, that the distance is for the best, that nothing has really changed. But emotional certainty doesn't disappear quietly. It fades in waves. Moments of calm are interrupted by sudden thoughts of you. A song, a place, a random memory triggers a feeling she didn't expect. That's because certainty, once broken, creates emotional echoes. The mind keeps searching for the missing anchor. What intensifies the pain is not knowing what you're thinking or feeling. Silence creates ambiguity, and ambiguity breeds anxiety. She wonders if you're angry, indifferent, relieved, or completely moved on. The lack of information forces her imagination to fill in the blanks, and the imagination almost always paints a picture more emotionally charged than reality. That uncertainty becomes uncomfortable because it removes her sense of control. When emotional certainty is gone, self-doubt often follows. She may start questioning her decisions, her timing, or how she handled things with you. Thoughts like, did I misjudge him? Or did I make a mistake? Begin to surface. This internal questioning is painful because it challenges her emotional narrative. What once felt clear now feels unresolved, and unresolved emotions demand attention. Another layer of pain comes from the loss of emotional validation. When you were there, your attention affirmed her value, her desirability, and her emotional importance. Silence removes that affirmation. Even confident people feel the absence of validation when it disappears unexpectedly. It's not about ego, it's about emotional feedback. Without it, she feels a subtle sense of emotional invisibility, which can be deeply unsettling. The longer the silence continues, the more her mind returns to the emotional consistency you once provided. She remembers how you showed up, how you listened, how you responded in moments that mattered. Those memories gain emotional weight because they contrast sharply with the current void. What once felt ordinary now feels rare. The pain grows not because you are gone, but because what you represented is missing. This is where regret can begin to form, not dramatic regret, but quiet reflection. She replays moments and wonders if she took your presence for granted. She considers whether she communicated clearly enough or valued you fully. These reflections are uncomfortable because they force her to confront the possibility that she contributed to the emotional loss she now feels. And accountability, even when unspoken, carries emotional weight. Silence also removes the emotional relief that comes from reaction. When you respond, argue, or explain, it gives her something to push against. It creates emotional movement. When there is no response, there is no release. The emotions stay contained, circulating internally. This internalization intensifies feelings rather than diffusing them. The pain doesn't dissipate, it deepens. Over time, this loss of certainty reshapes how she remembers you. You are no longer just someone from her past. You become a symbol of emotional stability that is now absent. She may meet other people, but the comparison is inevitable. Others might provide attention, but it feels different because the emotional continuity you once offered is gone. That difference becomes noticeable, and noticing it hurts. It's important to understand that this pain is not caused by cruelty or intention. It's the natural result of emotional disruption. You didn't create the discomfort. You simply stopped cushioning it. Silence reveals what was emotionally relied upon, and once that reliance is gone, the nervous system has to adjust, often uncomfortably. In the end, what hurts her most is realizing that the emotional certainty she once had was tied to you. And now, without you, that certainty is missing. Silence forces that realization to surface, slowly but unmistakably, until it can no longer be ignored. Silence has a way of demanding resolution. When communication stops and emotional connection is left open-ended, the mind seeks closure. Over time, your silence becomes impossible for her to ignore because unresolved emotional energy does not disappear on its own. It either finds expression through action or it turns inward through deep reflection. In either case, silence forces a reckoning. At first, she may resist the urge to reach out. Pride, logic, or fear of rejection may hold her back. She might tell herself that if you wanted to talk, you would. But as the days pass, the unanswered questions grow heavier. The emotional loop remains open, and the desire to close it intensifies. Silence doesn't rush this process. It allows it to mature until the emotional pressure becomes strong enough to demand movement. When she finally considers reaching out, it's not because she suddenly forgot the reasons for the distance. It's because the emotional pull became stronger than her resistance. Curiosity turns into concern, and concern turns into action. She wants to know where she stands, what you're feeling, and whether the connection still exists. That moment of reaching out is significant because it comes from internal motivation, not external pressure. It's her choice driven by emotion rather than logic. If she doesn't reach out, silence still does its work. Reflection deepens in the absence of distraction. Without ongoing interaction to shape the narrative, her mind revisits the relationship honestly. She examines her role, her decisions, and her emotional responses. This kind of reflection is uncomfortable because it removes blame and brings clarity. Silence gives her no one to argue with but herself. Reflection often leads to reevaluation. She begins to see you not through the lens of conflict or emotion, but through memory and meaning. The intensity of past disagreements fades, replaced by a broader understanding of who you were in her life. She may recognize qualities she overlooked: your consistency, your patience, your emotional presence. These realizations don't happen when emotions are loud, they happen when things are quiet. Silence also creates emotional contrast. When she interacts with others during this period, the difference becomes apparent. Conversations feel lighter, connections feel less grounded, and emotional depth feels missing. This comparison isn't conscious at first, but it becomes clearer over time. You become the reference point, the standard against which other experiences are measured. That standard is shaped by memory, and memory is often kinder than reality ever was. If she does reach out, it's rarely casual on an emotional level, even if the message appears simple. Behind a short text is often weeks of internal dialogue. The act of reaching out represents surrendering to emotion, admitting that the silence mattered. It's an acknowledgement that you left a mark, and that mark didn't fade, it intensified. If she doesn't reach out, the reflection still alters how she carries you forward. You are no longer just someone she lost contact with. You become someone she learned from, someone who changed her emotional understanding. The silence reframes you as a meaningful chapter rather than an unresolved conflict. That reframing carries respect, and respect preserves memory. Silence also protects your position in her mind. By not chasing or forcing interaction, you avoid becoming associated with pressure or discomfort. Instead, your presence is remembered as calm, controlled, and self-assured. That emotional tone matters. People remember how someone made them feel more than what was said. Silence leaves behind a feeling of strength and dignity. Eventually, the silence ends either through contact or acceptance, but by the time it does, the emotional narrative has already been written. You are not forgotten in either outcome. If she reaches out, it's because the emotional connection survived the distance. If she doesn't, it's because the reflection reshaped her, not because you lacked importance. In both cases, silence ensures that your absence had meaning. It forces emotion to move, to grow, or to transform, and that transformation is what makes you unforgettable, not noise, not pursuit, but the quiet space where truth reveals itself.